In 1942, mosquitoes took out more American soldiers than enemy bullets. Not metaphorically or as a figure of speech. Literally, in the South Pacific, malaria caused more casualties than the entire Japanese army. More than 60% of all soldiers who fought in the Pacific contracted the disease. That's 1.2 million men shivering with fever in jungle hospitals, knocked out of the fight by something smaller than a fingernail. The U.S. Army panicked, and in that panic, they funded the most aggressive insect research program in human history. From it emerged techniques so effective, so cheap, and so simple that they could protect an entire camp for weeks without a single can of spray. Then the war ended, and a $5.5 billion insect repellent industry needed customers. The simplest way to create customers was to make you forget what soldiers already knew 80 years ago. They didn't stop teaching these methods because they failed. They stopped because they worked too well. A technique that costs nothing and lasts for weeks can't be sold in a bottle, and what can't be sold doesn't generate profit. This is the story of the soldier's secret to keeping bugs out of your camp forever, and why the chemical industry prayed you'd never find this information. To understand how powerful these forgotten techniques really are, we have to go back to the jungles of the Pacific in 1942. The place is Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands. U.S. Marines have just landed on a strip of volcanic jungle so dense that sunlight barely reaches the ground. The temperature is around 95 degrees. The humidity is at 95%, and the mosquitoes are unlike anything these men have ever seen. Army technician 4th grade James Lobnow, stationed in Ramgarh, India, was so overwhelmed by the giant insects that he took a hammer and started smashing them against the barracks walls while a military photographer captured the moment. That photo became one of the most famous pest control images of the entire war. But Lobnow wasn't alone in his desperation. Marines in the Pacific were using what they called Freon grenades, small canisters of refrigerant gas they would spray inside their tents every night just so they could sleep without being eaten alive. Across the entire Pacific theater, soldiers were losing a war against an enemy that weighed less than 2.1, and the numbers were catastrophic. In 1942 alone, the U.S. Army treated 48,000 cases of malaria in the Southwest Pacific area alone. At Milne Bay, the infection rate was so devastating, it was the equivalent of every soldier contracting the disease 4 times in a single year, and they lost 12,000 man-days of work per month at that base alone. In some camps, 30% of all troops were unable to fight on any given day, not because of bullets, but because of mosquitoes. General Douglas MacArthur himself stated that this would be a long war if for every division he had facing the enemy, he had to count on a 2nd division in the hospital with malaria and a 3rd convalescing from this debilitating disease. For every soldier fighting, 2 were sick or recovering. The mosquito was winning the war. Stay with me, because what comes next changes everything you think you know about insect protection. But here is where the story takes a turn, because the Army doesn't accept defeat. Not from bullets, and certainly not from bugs. In the fall of 1941, the U.S. government signed a contract with the Bureau of Entomology and Plant Quarantine, a division of the Department of Agriculture with one single mission: find something, anything, that would keep bugs off soldiers. What followed was the most intense insect research race in recorded history. In August 1942, the National Research Council held its first conference on insect repellents and recommended a chemical called indolone for immediate military use. Months later, they added dimethyl phthalate, then Rutka 612, and by September 1943, they combined all 3 into a classified formula called 622, 6 parts dimethyl phthalate, 2 parts Rutka 612, and 2 parts indolone. This mixture gave soldiers hours of protection against mosquitoes, sandflies, chiggers, and the mites that carried scrub typhus. Tests in Egypt showed it was effective against sandflies for 5 to 7 hours, and tests in Peru showed it worked against the insects carrying Bartonellosis. But the real breakthrough came in 1944 when a USDA chemist named Samuel Gertler developed a compound called DEET, short for diethyltoluamide. Originally tested as an agricultural insecticide, DEET entered military use in 1946 and civilian use in 1957. Soldiers called the original mixture bug juice, 75% DEET mixed with 25% ethanol. And today, billions of doses of DEET are used around the world every year. But DEET was only half of the military strategy, because the smartest thing the Army discovered wasn't a chemical, it was a system. This information is just the surface. There are fire techniques that military units use that are now classified as dangerous. Emergency shelters that cost nothing and outperform $200 tents, natural repellents that indigenous tribes mastered centuries ago, and preservation methods that work without fridges and without electricity. This is what the Army discovered that the insect repellent industry desperately doesn't want you to understand. Bugs don't find you by smell alone. They find you through a combination of carbon dioxide, body heat, moisture, and movement. And a single mosquito can detect your carbon dioxide trail from over 100 feet away. This is why spraying yourself with chemicals is only one piece of the puzzle. The Army developed what they called an integrated defense system. Not a product, but a layered system. And the foundation of that system wasn't something you sprayed on your skin. It was something you did to your environment. The first layer is what the Army calls site selection and modification. Before a single soldier ever set up camp, specialized teams would survey the entire area for standing water within a 300-meter radius. Because mosquitoes lay their eggs in stagnant water. A single puddle the size of a bottle cap can produce hundreds of mosquitoes in just 1 week, and military units would drain, fill, or treat every source of standing water around their camps. This alone reduced mosquito populations by as much as 70% in some operational areas. 70% fewer mosquitoes before anyone ever applied a single drop of repellent. How many campers do you know who check for standing water before pitching a tent? Almost none, because the industry wants you to believe the answer is in a spray can. The second layer is what changed the game forever. And this is the part the $5.5 billion repellent industry absolutely does not want you to know. In 1943, two USDA researchers named Lyle Goodhue and William Sullivan invented the aerosol can, the ancestor of every commercial spray product you see on the shelves today. Soldiers called it the bug bomb, but while the Army was developing chemical sprays, they simultaneously discovered something far more powerful. Something that didn't require a factory, didn't require a patent, and didn't require a single purchase. The Army documented that certain natural materials, when burned in a controlled way near a campsite, created zones of protection that lasted for hours, not minutes. Hours. Specifically, the smoke from aromatic plants disrupted the mosquitoes' ability to lock onto human targets. The carbon dioxide trail is masked, their heat sensors are confused, and their entire navigation system fails. Major William Gorgas, the U.S. Army doctor who eradicated malaria and yellow fever in Panama to make the canal construction possible, used pyrethrum smoke burned inside sealed dwellings to control mosquitoes as far back as 1904. Mosquito repellent coils containing pyrethrum powder have been commercially available since 1902 and are still widely used across Asia today, over 120 years later. And the plants that produce this protective smoke most effectively aren't exotic or rare. They are in your kitchen right now: sage, rosemary, lavender, thyme, mint, and cedar. This isn't folklore. The Army documented its effectiveness, and indigenous people on every continent had been using them for thousands of years before any soldier ever set foot in the Pacific. Algonquin nations burned bundles of sage to keep biting insects away from their camps for centuries before Europeans reached North America. Aboriginal Australians used eucalyptus smoke to create bug-free zones around their sleeping areas for countless generations. Communities across Southeast Asia burned citronella grass, the very plant that produces citronella oil, long before it was ever turned into a $20 candle sold in garden stores. These civilizations didn't have DEET. They didn't have aerosol cans. They had fire and plants, and it worked. Science confirms everything these cultures already knew. Cedarwood contains natural oils, including a compound called thujone, which are toxic to mosquitoes but completely safe for humans. And when cedar burns, those oils are released into the air, creating an invisible chemical barrier that mosquitoes cannot cross. Sage smoke is even more potent. The aromatic compounds in sage, specifically camphor, 1,8-cineol, and alpha-thujone, directly interfere with the olfactory receptors that mosquitoes use to track their human targets. In simple terms, sage smoke blinds a mosquito's nose. They literally cannot smell you. Rosemary does something similar. When burned, it releases compounds like camphor and borneol that mosquitoes find extremely repulsive. And lavender smoke has been proven to be highly effective at repelling all flying insects. None of this is new information. It has been documented in scientific literature for decades, but it doesn't appear on any camping gear website or in any outdoor outfitter catalog because it doesn't generate a single dollar for the insect repellent industry. The third layer the Army developed was the most revolutionary of all, and this is where the story of a flower and a soldier merge into something incredible. There is a flower called the chrysanthemum, specifically the pyrethrum daisy, and for centuries people in Persia and the Caucasus region would grind up the dried flowers and use the powder to kill insects on contact. The active compound is called pyrethrin, a natural insecticide produced by the flower itself as a defense mechanism against bugs. During World War II, the United States actually supported efforts to grow pyrethrum crops in Kenya, specifically to make insect protection products available to Allied troops, because pyrethrum was originally imported from Japan, and that supply was cut off by the war. But natural pyrethrin had a problem. It broke down quickly in sunlight. So in 1972, scientists in the UK synthesized a more stable version and called it permethrin. This is where the Army made one of the most significant discoveries in outdoor protection history. They found that if you treat fabric with permethrin, the compound bonds to the textile fibers and won't wash out for weeks. Once dry, it is completely odorless, invisible, doesn't change the texture or color of the fabric, and any insect that touches that treated material is stunned or dies within seconds. The U.S. Department of Defense tested it extensively, and the results were staggering. Permethrin-treated uniforms combined with DET applied to exposed skin provided 99.9% protection against mosquito bites, even in extreme laboratory conditions, where unprotected subjects received an average of over 100 bites per hour. Think about that number. Over 1,000 bites an hour for unprotected people, and almost zero for those using the Army's layered system. A study from the University of Rhode Island found that people wearing permethrin-treated shoes and socks were 73.6 times less likely to get a tick bite than those wearing untreated footwear. Not 73% less likely, 73 times less likely. A separate study published in the Journal of Medical Entomology recruited outdoor workers and had some of their clothing commercially treated with permethrin. In the first year, workers wearing treated clothing experienced 65% fewer tick bites than those wearing untreated clothing. Another study on summer camps found that permethrin-treated tents reduced mosquito bites in the campsite area by 44%. And that permethrin treatment was more effective than personal insect repellent applied to the skin alone. The Army was so convinced by the data that today, every combat uniform in the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps comes factory-treated with permethrin. Every single one. The factory treatment lasts for the entire life of the uniform and survives over 50 washings without losing effectiveness. Ticks that crawl onto a permethrin-treated uniform fall off before they can attach and feed. Mosquitoes and flies that land on the fabric fall off and often die from the brief exposure. This is not classified technology. It is not restricted to military personnel, and it has been available to civilians since 2003. You can buy permethrin spray at any outdoor store for about $10 or $50 a bottle, and one bottle treats 5 full outfits, including shirts, pants, and socks. Each home treatment lasts for 6 weeks or 6 washings, whichever comes first. And you can treat your tent, your sleeping bag, your backpack, your hammock, your camp chair, any fabric item you own. The CDC recommends it. The EPA has registered it as safe for use on clothing, and it has been sold to hikers and campers for over 2 decades. So here is the question that should keep you up at night. Why does almost nobody know this? Why isn't permethrin-treated clothing the first thing recommended on every camping website and in every outdoor survival guide? Why does every article on bug protection while camping start with, buy this $40 bottle of spray, instead of, here is the military system that costs almost nothing? The answer is $5.5 billion. That is the current size of the global insect repellent market. $5.5 billion in annual revenue, growing at nearly 7% a year, projected to hit over $8 billion by 2030. This industry is dominated by companies like SC Johnson, Reckitt Benckiser, Spectrum Brands, and Johnson & Johnson. Companies that sell sprays, lotions, coils, vaporizers, candles, and bracelets. Products you need to buy over and over again for every camping trip, every summer, every season for the rest of your life. Now think about what the military system actually requires. One $50 bottle of permethrin that lasts 6 weeks, a handful of sage or rosemary from your garden that costs absolutely nothing, and the knowledge of where to set up your tent, which is free once you learn it. No subscriptions, no refills, no repurchases. You can't build a $5.5 billion industry on a $15 bottle that lasts 6 weeks in a plant that grows for free in your backyard. You can't patent sage smoke. You can't patent the act of choosing a campsite away from standing water. And you can't create brand loyalty around knowledge that anyone can share for free. So instead, the industry spends millions on marketing, telling you that bugs are an unsolvable problem that requires constant chemical intervention. They run ads showing happy families spraying themselves from head to toe. They sponsor outdoor events and give out free samples to create habits. They never mention site selection. They never mention smoke barriers. They never mention permethrin-treated gear. And they never mention that the Army solved this problem decades ago. Because the moment you learn the Army's integrated system, you stop being a customer. And a customer who stops buying is the outdoor industry's worst nightmare. I have to be honest with you about something because credibility matters more than hype. Permethrin is not perfect. It is a synthetic pesticide, and it is highly toxic to cats and to fish. If you have cats at home, you must let your treated clothing dry completely for at least 2 hours before wearing it around them. And you should never wash permethrin-treated clothing in water that could reach natural waterways. You should never spray it directly on your skin. It is designed for fabric only. Also, burning sage and rosemary won't give you 100% protection. No single method on Earth will. That is exactly the point. The Army understood that bug defense is a system, not a product. No one layer is perfect, but all the layers together are nearly invincible. So here is what you do. Here is the soldier system adapted for modern camping. Layer 1, site selection. Before you set up your tent, walk the area. Look for standing water within 100 yards. Puddles, tire ruts, fallen logs holding water, any container or depression that collects rain. Then move away from those sources. Choose high ground with a bit of a breeze because mosquitoes are poor flyers. Even a light 3 to 5 mile per hour wind makes it nearly impossible for them to navigate. And this simple step removes more mosquitoes than any spray can ever will. Layer 2, smoke barriers. Get your campfire going and gather a bundle of dried sage, rosemary, or lavender. You can bring bundles from home tied with cotton twine, or just buy fresh herbs from a grocery store before your trip. Toss them onto the edge of the fire, not the center, because you want them to smolder slowly and release smoke for as long as possible. The smoke creates a zone around your camp that mosquitoes will not cross. Keep a few extra bundles ready. When one burns out, add another. And if you don't have herbs, cedar wood works exceptionally well on its own because of its natural thujone content. Layer 3, permethrin treatment. Before your trip, spray your tent, clothing, camp chair, and gear with a 0.5% permethrin solution. Lay the items out outdoors in a shaded area. Spray evenly from 6 to 8 inches away and let them dry completely for 2 to 4 hours. Once dry, the treatment is odorless and invisible, and it will protect your gear for 6 weeks or 6 washings. Pay special attention to socks, pant cuffs, the tops of shoes, and the brims of hats, because these are the entry points where ticks and mosquitoes first make contact with your body. Layer 4, topical repellent on exposed skin only. Use DEET or picaridin on your hands, neck, face, and ankles, the areas your treated clothing doesn't cover. That's it. 4 layers. Total cost for an entire season of camping, about $25 or $30. Compare that to buying spray after spray at $15 or $20 a can every single trip. The industry charges you hundreds of dollars over a lifetime for a fraction of the protection a soldier gets for almost nothing. In 1942, soldiers in the South Pacific were losing a war to an insect that weighed less than a raindrop. And the Army responded with the most effective bug defense system ever created. Not a product, but a system. Site selection, smoke barriers, treated fabric, and topical repellent. This knowledge didn't die. It was waiting in field manuals and research papers. Now you know the truth. If this story has changed the way you look at the outdoors, subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are unearthing the history and the secrets they tried to bury. Stay prepared and stay informed. The next chamber